Now we're going to spend our fifth week in Prodigal Son this week, and we're going to finish it this week. The wonderful grace of Jesus. And this week's going to be different than all the other weeks, where we've looked at them in depth, we've taken it apart, and we've looked at it more expositorily the past 4 weeks. This week I just want us to take away from it some insights, and then also some understanding maybe we didn't have before that I just couldn't find where to put in the teaching the weeks before. But then also to challenge us a little bit, to have us to examine our own selves, to see what we are doing, how we are doing it, and why we should serve the Lord. Now, we spent the past couple of weeks looking at what sin looks like. And sin looks like a rebellious son who's lived riotously in a pigsty. But sin also looks like a self-righteous son stubbornly remaining in a garden rather than entering the house to celebrate with his father and with his long-lost brother. One is very obvious to our eye. I mean, the kid wallowing around in the pigsty trying to get pods of wheat to eat, that's easy to see. But it's a little bit harder for us to see the older brother and how great his sin was. And in fact, I would propose it is even greater than the younger sons, because the younger son did not directly disparage the father. Now, he wasted everything, right? But he said nothing about the father's character. But more importantly, we do not see the older brother repent. He does not recognize his sin. He does not recognize nor care about the joy of the father. So this is what sin looks like. But now, before I get to that, I want to challenge you a little bit. If somebody loses a dog, what do? Put it on Facebook in 5 minutes. Make posters of it and go down to Staples. Well, I guess you'd have to go a long way to go to Staples now. But you'd go somewhere and make copies. Put them up on telephone poles and out at Ingles and different places like that. You'd call your neighbors. Hey, have you seen my dog? Right? You would call the pound, probably daily. You would search for that dog until you either found it or you were exhausted, right? You might even go door to door. Have you seen my dog? Have you seen my dog? Have you seen my dog? And yet when we know a brother or a sister who is out of favor with God, what do? Now, I am not saying put their face on Facebook and say out of favor with God. I am not saying put their face on a telephone pole. But what I am saying is we should have more compassion for people than we do dogs. And not only a brother or a sister that's out of favor with God, someone that we know that is lost, without hope in this world, without God in this world, no hope for the future, their lives completely falling apart. What do? And so, with that question, if someone loses a dog, what do? I'm going to come back with a second question. How important is the father to you? And you say, Bill, that seems like the wrong question. It seems like the question would be, how important are men and women to you? But I'm asking, how important is God to you? Because that's what this parable is all about. It's about the importance of the Father. Now remember, this whole setting, this whole story revolves around a number of meals. Okay? It revolves around a meal that Jesus had where a woman was found with a disabling spirit for 18 years, and Jesus healed her, and the master, the officer, the head of the synagogue was incensed that he would dare do that on the Sabbath day. And he says, listen, there are 6 days to come and be healed, but not on the seventh. He's broken God's law. The woman had been with that man for 18 years, and he hadn't done anything from Monday to Friday. Right? You come on those days to be healed, he says. And Jesus says, how bad is that? If you had a donkey or an ox that fell into a well and was going to drown, would you get it out? You care more about donkeys and oxen than you do about this woman who has been bent over for 18 years. And then you have a second meal on the successive Sabbath day, where Jesus goes and eats with the Pharisees, and they have set it up to find a reason that they might accuse and then execute the Christ, excommunicate him or exterminate him. They have in their midst a man with dropsy. And now, rather than just one official in the synagogue who can get on to Jesus, they have a whole cadre of Pharisees around. And they know that Jesus will have compassion on the man with dropsy, a disfiguring, swelling disease. And Jesus looks at them and says, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not? And they didn't say a word. You know why they didn't say a word? Because they couldn't do it. Therefore, they had never made a law about it. And so Jesus heals the man with dropsy and sends him away, and they remained quiet. Now listen, they were wanting to kill him at this meal. Then Jesus tells the parable of another meal. Not really a parable, it's kind of a different kind of story. And Jesus says, there was a master who was going to have a feast, and he sent out invitations. And the people accepted the invitations, but when the day of the feast came, one of them said, I just bought a piece of property, I must go check it out. One said, I bought 5 yoke of oxen, I need to go out and check these 10 ox. One says, I've just married a wife, please have me excused. And the master of the house was angry. And he said, go out into the villages, go out into the town, into the streets, and invite them to come. And the man of the house comes back and says, we've done that, and there's still room. And he says, go out into the highways, into the hedges, and compel them to come, that my Father's house might be filled. That my Father's house might be filled. And then you have a fourth meal. On the next day, Jesus is eating with some publicans and sinners, as defined by the Pharisees, and trying to break his hold over the people, trying to break Jesus' hold over the people. They say, look at him. He is uncomfortable with the people of God, the Pharisees. He eats with sinners. They had just had a meal where they were trying to trick him so that they could kill him, and yet they don't see themselves as sinners. But they see they see themselves as righteous. And so Jesus tells these parables. The story of a lost sheep, and when it's found, the shepherd gathers people together and they celebrate. A lost coin. And when the woman of the house finds it, she calls people together and they celebrate. And now, the parable of a lost son. Now, I started this whole thing 5 Sunday mornings ago, asking you the question, how do you think most people perceive God the Father? As stern, as foreboding. And it's really people who are stern and foreboding and hard. God is not, right? And we've gone through these weeks and looked at how much we have been forgiven and what we have been forgiven for. Those things open that everyone knows that we've done, but also those thoughts that we've had. Those things that we've done that we've excused ourselves even though we know that they're wrong. It breaks my heart to think about Christ hanging on the cross and my thoughts going through his head. That beauty, that loveliness, that gorgeousness, that love hanging there on the cross, thinking what I have thought. And then we looked at all you have to give up to become a Christian is hell. That's all you have to give up. You know, we think if we come to Christ that he's going to take all the joy out of our lives. He's going to, break both of our legs, make us wear a tutu and go to Africa and live with the snakes and, whatever. No. All we have to give up is the broad road that leads to destruction. And to walk through the open door that leads back to God. And then the question I ask for today is, will we pick up what he offers to us? Jeff, please. Thank you. Can I say hi to everybody? Will we pick up what he offers to us? You see, we think that we have to give up a lot to be saved or to be obedient to him, to be effective to him. It's not us that gives up. It's God that does the giving. He gives his son that we might live, and then he gives the riches of the son that we might be effective in ministry. Now let's read again this parable. Now we've spent a lot of time on it. Like I said, we're not going to go through it verse by verse this week because we've done that over the past few weeks. I just want to make some comments and draw our hearts out a little bit this morning. Then he said there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of property that is coming to me." And he divided his property between them, the elder son and the younger son. And not many days later, the younger son gathered all that he had and took and journeyed into a far country. And there he squandered his property with reckless or riotous living. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in great need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his fields to feed pigs. And while he was longing to be fed, and he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, but no one gave him anything. So he came to himself. But when he came to himself, what a wonderful phrase. When he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's servants have more than enough bread? And here I perish with hunger. I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants." Now here's a question. Why did the younger son write a script? We've all kind of done this before, right? You know, you're going to talk to somebody with your hat in your hand or whatever, and you go through what you're going to say. You know, you got to apologize to your wife for something that you've done wrong, and you kind of think through what you're going to say. You know, I said something that I didn't mean in negative, but it hurt somebody's feelings, and I'll rehearse what I'm going to say. Well, the younger son here, in effect, he writes a script. Why did he write this script? Because he wondered if the father would receive him or not, would accept him. I mean, the younger son had dishonored the father. He had, in effect, said, Dad, I wish you were dead. His reputation had been dishonored in the village, in the community, and in his family. And now the son is going to come. He had made an outrageous request. Give me my inheritance now. And now he's coming back with another outrageous request. Take me back. Make me like one of your hired servants. But here's the thing. It was not outrageous in the way he thought. I was perplexed by the commentators on this particular passage because they all seemed to think this was negative, him writing this script. I don't see it as negative at all. I see it as a wonderful expression of repentance. And what was outrageous was not the request, will you receive me back? What was outrageous is verse number 20. And he arose, and while he was a long way off, while he was still a long way off, he arose and came to his father, and while he was still a long way off, his father saw him, felt compassion, and ran and embraced him and kissed him. You see, he thought the request would be outrageous. Take me back. After the stupid, outrageous request he made at the beginning, give me my inheritance now. But what was outrageous was what the father did. By the way, this is the only time you see God running in all the scriptures. You could look from Genesis to Revelation 22. You're not going to find it in any other place. Jesus reserved it for this story. When the son is coming home, God runs. Right? He can't control himself. He doesn't care what the people in the village think. He hikes up his robe and he runs through town. He hurdles the pomegranate stand, whatever he did, I don't really know. Right? And he goes through town and he embraces his son. You see, the younger son had a plan to work for reconciliation. That's where the commentators say this is a bad thing. But God never let him get that far. All he had to bring was his wretchedness. I will arise and go to my father and say to him, I have sinned against heaven and against you. All he needed was his righteousness, wretchedness. Right? And the only thing that he could provide the father was great joy. Right? The father ran and embraced him and kissed him. Look at this. And the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. And God cut him off right there. The father cuts him off right there. You're not going to work for your salvation. You can't work for it. You've brought your wretchedness. You've understood it. You've come to yourself, and that's all that's needed. But the father said to him, bring quickly the best robe. That would have been the father's robe, right? And you cover his wretchedness with my righteousness. Put a ring on his finger. I know he's changed and I can trust him with my authority. And put shoes on his feet. He's not going to be a servant. He's my son. And more than that, bring the fatted calf and let us eat and celebrate. Now, we talked last week, that's not just him and his dad eating 800 pounds of meat, right? Just like the shepherd gathered together his friends whenever he found the sheep, just like the woman gathered her friends when she found the coin, the same would be here. He's gathering together the village. Let's eat and celebrate. For my son was dead. You see what would have happened in that day? We talked about this, but it was a month ago, to remind you. When he said such an outrageous thing to the father, they would have had a funeral for him. He was no longer part of that family, no longer part of that community, right? They would have literally had a funeral service for him. But he's no longer dead. He's what? He's alive, right? He's my son. He was lost, but now he's found. And they began to celebrate. Listen, the son did not deserve a reception like this. This is grace. And it's exactly what Jesus did for us. He came to our village, and he ran through the town, not worrying about the smirks, not worrying about the laughing, not worrying about the nails and the soldiers, to embrace us, to gather us up, and to take us home. God rejoices in the return of this son. He has to, because God is love. He's creation, not destruction. He does not want to pour out wrath. He does not want to pour out wrath. Now, he will, but he doesn't want to. I mean, he has to, because he doesn't want to bring corruption and disease into the new home that he's prepared for us. But he doesn't want to. How overjoyed do you think it is every time how overjoyed do you think he is every time someone is saved and he doesn't have to pour out his wrath, he gets to pour out his love? This is God. And then that last phrase, they began to celebrate. The dinner here is not for the son. The dinner here, the celebration, is for the Father. For this, my son was dead and is alive again. My son was lost and now is alive. Right? The feast is not in honor of the son. It's in honor of the Father. It's not for sin. It's in honor of redemption. It's the Father's goodness that is on display in this meal. It's the Father's grace. It's the Father's love that is being celebrated here. Now the older son was in the field, and as he came and drew near the house, he heard music and dancing. And I'm sure that shocked him to no end. Right? Now the brother would have almost certainly known that the older brother would almost certainly have known the younger brother had come home. Because how long does it take to... we've got some younger people here. Dispatch a cow. Dress it. Skin it. Quarter it. Prepare it for consumption. And then to cook it. And then the servants going out and telling everyone. I can't imagine they didn't tell the older son that his son was home. That his brother was home. I can't fathom that. It doesn't fit with any of the stories before, and it just doesn't fit with the character of God. But when he drew near the house, what do you think he was expecting to hear? There's been a time or two in my life where I didn't do what my mom and dad said. And my brothers knew that I had not done what my mom and dad had told me to do. And they kind of stayed away from the house because they knew what was going to be going on. That was my mom. My dad would be sitting at the table going, wasn't a fun house to be in for a while. The younger son comes home and he expects something like that. But what does he hear? Music and dancing. Not the younger son tied to a pole and being whipped. Not the dad yelling out. Not the whole town there to stand in judgment and to ridicule the younger son. He comes home and hears music and dancing. What's going on? And he called one of the servants and he asked him, what's going on? He says, your brother is coming. Your father has killed the fatted calf because he has received him back and is whipping him in the backyard. No, he's received him back and he's no longer going to be a son. He's going to be your personal servant. No, he's received him back what? Safe and sound. I think what shocked the older son is that it was a party that was going on. And he was angry. He was angry and refused to go in. And then another great picture of love. The father leaves the party. He leaves his own party. He leaves the party that he's been waiting for ever since the younger son left. He leaves the party that has his given in his honor. He leaves the party to go out and to tell the older son, you're welcome, son. Come in. But the older son answered the father, not coming to himself, but having a false view of himself. I've always been faithful. I've done everything that you've ever asked me to do, never once disobeying your command. Again, we've talked about this. Baloney. Anyone who's had a kid would look at that verse and go, baloney. Right? You never gave me a young goat. No, but I gave you 2/3 of everything I had. That I might celebrate with my friends. I think that's the telling part. He doesn't want to celebrate with God. He wants to celebrate with his friends and talk about his dad and talk about his brother. He's a Pharisee, you see. He's a picture of those Pharisees. But when this son of yours came, you see, he's saying, I'm not part of the family, just like the younger son said. When this son of yours came, who's devoured your property with prostitutes, getting into a little gossip there, you killed the fatted calf for him. Listen, I want to say something just as plainly as I can say it. If God can be loving and gracious to those who have messed up and run away in riotous living, so can we. If God can be loving and gracious and forgiving, so can we. And we must be. I mean, God can be it. It's his creation that's ruined. It's his name that's been sullied. It's what he holds lovely that we have ruined. If he can forgive, so can we. And then the father says to him in verse number 31, son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. I haven't held anything back from you, and I won't hold anything back from you. You're always with me. And everything that is mine is yours. I think of this. You know, when Jesus said, seek ye first the kingdom of God and its righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. The things that he's talking about there, you remember, what you shall put on, what you shall eat, what you shall drink. You know, the little things of life. God says, I will provide them. And they're not little things at all until we sin. And then, oh God, that's all you've given me. You see, what the older son's problem is, he is concerned what would be required of him when he walks into that house. He'll have to be happy that his father is happy. He'll have to forgive and to receive his brother. The older son didn't lose anything. In fact, his brother is now alive. Now we've got to talk about the elephant in this story. And you say, Bill, I've read this story a whole bunch of times. There's no elephant in it. Y'all know what I'm talking about. The elephant in the room. When we read this story, especially in the eyes of the old man, especially in the eyes of the world, it seems unfair, doesn't it? Come on, we can be honest. When we read this story on the surface, it seems unfair, doesn't it? The younger son got his stuff, and what did he do? He wasted it. And now he's come back, and the father has not only received him back, but given him a ring, which will allow him to have more. It seems unfair. Son, you've always been with me, he says. You've never had any want. You've never had any hunger, right? You've never had to fight to survive. But you see, when sin is whispering in our ear, those things don't seem to matter so much. The younger son got to go out and have his fun, right? And I stayed at home and worked. What about the younger son's story sounds fun? It was fun for a little while, I'm sure, because sin, there is a pleasure in sin for a season. But what's his story? Starving to death in a foreign country, getting tricked by a guy who said, if you'll feed my pigs, I'll pay you, but he didn't give him anything, so he's out trying to fight a bunch of pigs for his food. And if you've never been around pigs, pigs are mean. Well, he got to have his fun. What was fun about that? Right? What's fun about loneliness? What's fun about hurting people? What's fun about being hurt? What's fun about sorrow? What's fun about any of that stuff? But you see, that's still our old man thinking. The younger son got to go out and have fun. And the older son got to stay home and eat. And have a warm place to stay. And not worry about anything. But you see, that stuff just doesn't seem to matter to us. Because sin whispers in our ear. The father leaves the party and goes to the older son because if you do not forgive others, what? Come on, y'all know that. If you do not forgive others, you yourself cannot be forgiven. It reveals that you're not forgiven if you can't forgive others. Right? The elephant in this story. The son, you've always been with me. You've always been welcome in my house. Right? I don't know what happened here. Doesn't matter. The older son thinks the father's being unfair. Well, he better hope the father's unfair. And you say, Bill, wait a minute, are you saying God is unfair? That's exactly what I'm saying. I do not deserve heaven. Jeff, even though he lovingly came up here and picked up my glasses and got my water, doesn't deserve heaven. Saul of Tarsus, who persecuted the church, didn't deserve heaven. Christ did not deserve the mocking, the crown of thorns, the stripes upon his back, the nails in his hands and his feet, and the death on the cross. He didn't deserve those stripes, by those stripes we were healed. You see, that's grace. And the older son, it's not fair, you're not fair. Well, praise God. You know, rather than boo-hoo, it should be, have I not used that enough lately? I'll use it right now. Rather than boo-hoo, it should be woo! You see, that's the whole point of this story. Is that the older son can't see his own sin. I want to party with my friends. I have never done anything wrong. I'm not like that Gomer over there. You see, he's just like the Pharisees. They can't see how sinful it was that they were trying to trap Jesus with the man who had the dropsy. They couldn't see their own sin in their own care, not caring for people. I mean, man, the man in the story where the woman had a spirit of Satan for 18 years doesn't rejoice when she is made whole. He stands up and he says, all right, listen, people. What you saw here today was a bad thing. You see, they can't see that. The son standing in the garden's only hope is that God is unfair. At least unfair in that sense. Y'all understand what I mean by that, right? I couldn't think of another word all week. I tried and I tried and I tried and I tried to think of a word, right? God's not unfair in a sinful sense. He's unfair in this sense. Christ came and took what was not due him so that what was due him could be given to us so that we won't receive what's due us. And now the very riches of Christ are ours. What's the elephant in the room? The unfairness of God. In the fact that he will receive the son home safe and sound. And that he will leave a party given in his honor and go out and to be scolded by an older son. All for the older son's benefit. Also that he won't have to pour out his wrath. When Jesus spoke about hell, Bill, that seems like a weird transition. No, it's not, though. Because Jesus is dying, literally, for these Pharisees to be saved. The ones that hate him, the ones who are trying to trip him up, to trap him, to kill him. He's literally dying for them to be saved. And hell will be populated with at least two types of people. When Jesus spoke of hell, he called it outer darkness where there's what? Weeping and gnashing of teeth. There'll be the gnashers. I don't deserve this. I don't deserve this. I'm a good man. I'm a good man. I wasn't Hitler. I'm a good man. Yes, when I heard about what God offered me, I giggled at it and I made fun of it. And I said, "There's no such thing as God." Yeah, I know that. I know that I said his son was a fairy tale, and yeah, I know I called all of his children, Gomers for believing, the fairy in the sky. I know it, but I don't deserve this. I don't deserve separation from God forever. The gnashers of teeth. And then there'll be the weepers. Those who knew the gospel, knew it well, had felt the call of God over and over and over again, but just never would humble themselves and step out and say, "Here I am, Lord. I have sinned against heaven and against you." But I want you to understand something. Hell is not God's desire, and it never wants to be separation from God for eternity. Hell, right? That is not God's desire. What is God's desire is that all men everywhere would be saved. And there's only one type of person in heaven. The recipients of God's grace. Those who have come to themselves. Those who no longer are worried about fairness and scales, because you know what? We're always going to lose on that scale. Because what did Jesus, the very first thing he taught was, your righteousness must exceed the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees. Your righteousness must be equal to God. Be ye holy, even as God is holy. That's the standard. You can't do it, but you can. Because when you come to Christ, what does he do? He takes off his coat of righteousness, and then we can put on his coat of righteousness to cover our wretchedness. And there, that righteousness is ascribed to me. Those who receive God's gift of grace for exactly what it is, eternal love. These are the people who are in heaven. Right? For those who have received his grace are now the sons of God. And then those of you who have already received it, you are to live and to work in such a way, not that you receive a goat to have your own party. The party was given for the Father. To live and to work in such a way to bring joy to the Father. That wayward one has come home. That lost one has been found. That dead one is raised to newness of life. If we lose a dog, we'll do everything we can. We have brothers and sisters out there who are wandering alone in the darkness, fighting with the pigs. Do what you can to bring them back. We have those out there with no hope. Do what you can to bring them back. You see, it's a story of wasted resources. One wasted his resources on riotous giving, and one wasted his resources on lifeless routine. And the question I have for you this morning is, am I involved in ministry? I wish I could tell you the blessings of ministry. I know that many of you already know them. But I promise you I wouldn't trade jobs with anybody in the world. Because the riches I receive from ministry are far greater than anything else I can imagine. And the riches that I receive from y'all are far more than anything that I can imagine. You see, one of those whispers of Satan in our ear is that somehow if we serve God in complete and absolute abandon, our life will be when we're not. Right? But we're so used to if it's just and not, we're okay. It's the weirdest sermon illustration I've ever used. Right? But we think it'll be, it's not. It's woohoo! God is mine and I am his. And I know that every moment of every day, and I see it in the work. I mean, I can't help anybody as Bill Vest, but as the child of God, exercising the riches of God and the giftedness of God, I can make a difference. And that difference is awesome. Yes, I do it for the Father. But I'm also at the party. Right? I mean, the party's given in honor of the Father. But I get to taste the sweetness, the savory, and all of that is there. Here's our question, right? Would you do more for a lost dog than a lost brother? And if you are one of those that out of embarrassment or humility or whatever have never received Christ, I beg you to come. Maybe you realized over the past few months or something that you never really were saved. You just understood the gospel, but you'd never given yourself to it. Today would be the day to come. Today would be the day to, do whatever the Spirit has been calling you to do. And as He calls and as we sing, I surrender all, listen to the Spirit of God and then obey what He has to say. Father, I thank you. And very simply I say, make our prayer come true. Let today be the first day of revival, and a revival that changes the world.